Hello, and welcome to the Beautifully Human podcast. I'm Nick Sheesby. In this podcast, I speak with beautiful humans from all around the world, sharing with you their incredible stories, revealing the power in every human story to spread love and humanity to a world that is in desperate need of it, to show that we can all connect in beautiful ways no matter where we come from or what we look like. What you will find out is that we are all beautifully human. Let's all be beautifully human. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Nice to hear your voice after years.
I know. It's fun. It's fun. It's been a very long time.
It has been, and I thank you. I really thank you a lot for inviting me to do this and your podcast. It's really cool. I've never done a podcast before, and yet thank you. For thinking of me and including me in this.
Of course.
That's humbling a little bit. So.
That's awesome. It's super fun. These conversations have been so enriching. So I'm excited for our conversation.
Me too. This will be my first podcast ever. So thank you for
Beautiful.
that for me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I do. I had it written down on here that we met at a Bush show.
We did.
And what year was that? You might have a better recollection of those years than I do.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think. You were doing the VIP stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I want to say, because there's been other people after you, probably 4 years ago.
Okay.
I want to say probably about that. Does that kind of time into you doing the VIP stuff, what you were doing at that time? I want to say that.
Yeah.
4 years seems that, possibly 5, but I don't think any longer than that.
Yeah. It is wild to think. I know I was working with them when I turned 30, because I just remember an insane night in Houston that happened on my 30th birthday. And then I worked with them again. Probably that was the time I met you, which was like a year and a half later. So yeah, 4 years, I would say.
Probably, although if you did it with them the first time, you would have met me then too. I've never not done a VIP with them. But I've seen so many Bush shows. I don't know. I've met some really awesome people, crew wise, and things through just going to see so many of their concerts, which has been kind of cool. Just people's paths that I wouldn't have crossed any other way. Like you, I doubt our paths would have crossed any other way. So it's pretty cool to just meet other people and, as crew and other people kind of rotate out. Just meet the people kind of behind the scenes and things. So
yeah, it is really cool. And I think on my end, it's neat. I have a different experience than a lot of the crew, because with the VIP, I get to meet all the fans. I'm kind of like the frontline customer service person for the band with all the fans that want to meet them. And I have been so fortunate to work with bands whose fans are just the kindest, sweetest people, which definitely Bush fans fall into that category. So I was going to say, it's such a cool part of music is the fans, the super fans that come out and meet the bands and do the VIP experiences. And tell me, it's really cool, the community that comes of that. I've seen so many people that have bonded together that you wouldn't have met without going to these shows. So kind of tell me about that.
So I've been a fan of Bush since 16 Stone came out. I want to say I was 13 or 14, and the first time I saw them was actually at their record release party for their second album, Raise the Blade Suitcase. So some of the people, I met a person named Mike at that time, and a few other people that I've actually continued to see at concerts since I was I think I was 14 at that point, and I just turned 39 on Tuesday. So
yeah,
I mean, this has been
birthday.
A huge part of my life for the majority of my life.
Right.
And it's just really interesting to see where we've all landed, different things that we've done in life, some people that I've drifted apart from and we're not as close, and then other people that I've made long lasting friendship that are not just quote unquote concert friends or Facebook friends. So I've met in the past few years, I guess, since Bush kind of reunited, like 8, 9, 10 years ago, maybe even at this point, of people who have become like actual friends. So like there's people,
Yeah.
you meet at the concerts, maybe you're Facebook friends, you catch up, in line at the concert, but like that's kind of where the relationship ends. And then I've had some other friends that have been like really lifelong, or some that I've met since Bush kind of like got back together, and some of them have become like some of my closest friends. They were at my wedding over a year ago. We know the ins and outs of each other's lives. We're there for each other as
Yeah.
support. And these people that like, there's no way I ever would have met them if I didn't travel to see Bush too, because some of these are people that I've met in like other states. So there's
Right.
no way I would have met them. And it's just so cool how it starts off with just like, oh, we're standing in line together for 8 hours, and you just kind
Right.
of chit chat, and chit chat
Yeah.
about the band and just like some other surface stuff. And yet the more you end up standing in line with these people, the more you start to know about them. And I've made like a really small handful of like friendships. So not just, Bush connections on Facebook or something, but people who, I trust my like deepest, darkest secrets with. And
Yeah.
again, like that, people I would want at my wedding to share my wedding with me. And it's just been really cool because I know I never would have run into these people in any other
Right.
way. Like if our paths did cross, we wouldn't know it. It would be like walking through like a New York street or something along those
Sure.
lines.
Yeah.
So like when you think of like music, like not only has that band just gotten me through a lot of stuff, that's also brought me some really true, genuine friendships. Which is it's just so awesome. And that, that experience, and the diehard fans, like,
Yeah.
that are there at 8 o'clock in the morning or even earlier,
Right.
standing in line all day just to ensure, getting on the rail. And, that they really appreciate the band as much as like I do. And it's kind of just cool to see that.
Yeah, it is. It's something that, I don't think a lot of people think of, but I mean, even the fact that they're in your wedding is so rad, I mean, what a cool, like you said, you start off with a common connection, right? Of, well, man, we love this band. They've changed my life in countless amount of ways. And then it's like, yeah, these people, I trust them. They're gonna be my good friends. I mean, you're saying you met people when you were 14 that you're still friends with 25 years later.
Yeah.
That's significant. I mean, that's obviously more than half your lifetime, which is incredible. Yeah. That's so cool. I love that.
Yeah, it is. And that's brought me to like, I've never been so obsessed with a band as Bush, not like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, but there's another band that I've also fallen in love with, and like they're definitely my second favorite band. Like Bush will always be my first, but this band I actually met through Bush. They actually opened up for Bush a few years ago, and I've never had an opening band like open up for any band that like you fall in love with that heavily, and I did, and I love them. Well, Bush will always be my number one, and yet even with that second band, same thing. Like I've formed, I've traveled to other countries, like
really?
with friends, and seen true friendships with that other band as well. So it's just, music is just one of the main things in my life, and it's just so cool how like just music can intertwine in so many other aspects of your life.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do what I do without the love of music, It's like, yeah, I mean, it's a very fortunate job that I get to have, or did have before all of this, but it's like, that's why I have a connection with every fan that I meet, or that I have such an appreciation during those meet and greets or those VIP experiences, or if I'm walking outside of the venue and I stop to say hello to the people that are in line, because I know how much music has saved my life, and how much it's shaped my life. And it's just so neat to see how much it affects people's lives, and just the bonds, and yeah, these friendships that blossom from that, just from the mutual love of a band. Then you learn to know this person.
It's like, it's such a, like I heard you say like, oh, music has saved my life, and it's such a cliche kind of statement, like a lot of people say that, and yet it's also so true. Like it's a cliche statement, and yet like that's the same for me as well. Like it is absolutely, like it's like one of the most important things in my life, and without it, like I can't even fathom what it would be like without music. Like, and I mean, this year has been the roughest for, in terms of like music, not being able to go to concerts, which is like my main coping mechanism.
Right.
And all, even though like that's been taken away, which I'm not gonna lie, has been extremely difficult not having that.
Absolutely.
Music is still there. At least you can still listen to music, and and with technology still have that somewhat connection. Not
Yeah.
the same, and yet it wouldn't be, we wouldn't have the things we have now 15 years ago, 10 years ago, without the connection of technology and things. So yeah, music
Absolutely.
is, I'm right there with you. Saved my life, continues to.
Yeah, and it is a cliche, but it became that because it's so true. It
Mm-hmm.
shaped so many people's lives. I mean, even when you get to know artists, and I've been fortunate to get to know a ton of bands in my lifetime now, and they have the same story. You don't
Mm-hmm.
pick up a guitar without falling in love with music, or maybe you do, but then you do fall in love with it, and then it's like, why would you have influences? Because of music. It's so influential. It's like, why do you play the music style that you do? Oh, because I love this band. It's like everybody. It's perpetuating. It's never stopping in any way, which is
Mm-hmm.
super rad. And it's funny too with this year, and I've said it a lot when I talk to people, but I had my famous last words this year right before lockdown because I was like, I'm in music, I'm in entertainment, we're good. People will always want to be or need to be entertained, and to get that escape, for a couple hours a
Mm-hmm.
night and just feel that feeling. And then the next day it was like, boom, everything shut down.
Yeah. Yeah. So difficult.
So it's
So
been
difficult.
brutal, yeah. But it also, another part that I wrote down is, it's really neat how, like you said, I haven't heard your voice in, let's say, 4 years, and I haven't spoken to you a ton, but like there's this word that keeps popping up that, I don't know if you know it or not, but it's sonder. Have you heard this word?
I have not. What does it mean?
Okay, so it means that, say you're looking out the window or you're walking down the sidewalk, and every person that is in the background of the movie of your life, or driving by the car beside you, whatever, every single person in that background part of your life has just as complex and deep life as you do.
Yeah.
Even if you have no idea what it is, they have that. They have friends, they have family, they have people that love them, they have difficulties, they have struggles, they have joys. And this just, it's like, until I made a post, I forget how long ago now, but you wrote me, about struggles that you were having too. I wrote about my struggles with alcohol, and then I just hear these amazing stories of your life, and it's like, that's the perfect example of it. Is, yes, I know you, I've met you,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen you on Facebook and those socials, but then you take one step lower, and it's like, wow, every life that you see is so complex and so much deeper than just, oh, that car that just drove by. That's just
Yeah.
meh. There's another person. It's like, no, that person's going to do something. They're running their errands. They're getting their Christmas gifts, or whatever they're doing is just as complex as what I'm doing sitting here right now.
Yeah. In therapy terms, we call that common humanity.
Yeah, I know. I it, and I'm sad that we lack common humanity. And I like that there's a word that somebody put to it, of like, something that should be so simple as common humanity
Yeah.
that isn't.
We all experience the exact same emotions. While our stories are different, like you said, we all go through struggles. We all go through joys and sadness and disappointment and anger and, loss and all of those things, regardless of where we are on the globe or our sexual orientation or, anything, what we do for a living, socioeconomic status, like we all still experience those things. And that's like the common humanity in it. And so many people have difficulty realizing that, I think.
Yeah, and yeah, it's this one's a really hard one for me to understand when people don't have that common humanity, because I just think, what makes you better than that person? Or what
Yeah.
makes, what is it that you think in your mind is putting you at the upper echelon of person than that
Yeah.
person that you don't like? Like, explain to me, because I would love to hear that, from these people of like, who, how, what's your advantage?
It would be interesting to know. And yet, I think it's a whole bunch of things like how were they raised?
Yeah.
What is their environment been like? What is their belief system? I think everything is complex. Like there's
True.
no black and white to really anything, even if it feels like it.
Right.
But I've wondered that too because I don't have that philosophy. Like I have the philosophy that you kind of have. While we're all different, we're all very much alike at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's why I've really truly enjoyed this, and why I love traveling. And like, you see it even with the traveling to the concerts that you see, and just getting out and experiencing and seeing, like, even if you're traveling in the States and you meet someone from Texas, it's far different than your life in New Jersey or my life in Tennessee or someone's life in Oregon. There's so much complexity to it, and it's so neat to travel and then put yourself in that place, or be somewhere that you're not familiar with and that other person is, so then you're vulnerable to them because they know where they're at and where to take you to. And it's just such a cool ebb and flow of getting to those places and just being like, yeah, take me around, let's see, like,
Yep,
explain to me what your place is about, let's see it.
absolutely. I think like I think I miss some of that sometimes when I do travel because sometimes like I'm only in a place for a very short period of time. If
Yeah.
I'm like, doing 5 concerts in a row and they're all in different states, like I spend more time at airports or
Right.
traveling to the next hotel than I do with being able to see the culture. And that's one like disappointment that I have with being able to to travel for the bands is that like I have to sacrifice that if I want to be in the front row.
That's true.
So it's
That
like
is
I have
true.
to, unless if it's a show where it's just seated, and then I've had the opportunity to do some exploring in the areas that I've been in because I don't need to stand in line for 10 hours.
Right.
And yet, like that's something I feel like I still need to do is see more of the states that I've been in outside of the hotel, the venue, and the airport.
Yeah. Hey, I'm right there with you. I fully understand that, just from touring. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
story of touring is, I have so many people that will reach out and be, or just even say, "Man, you've seen so much." And yes, that is true. I've been insanely fortunate to see what I've seen. But, I've been to, let's say, Hartford, Connecticut 35 times maybe, and I don't know anything about the place. I've seen 4 venues, and mostly that, and maybe the airport, or like, when we're traveling overnight in a bus, so we don't see anything, so like, a good majority of all the travel that I've done has been in a venue, in in my previous experiences, the bars close to the venues, like, it
Yeah.
didn't really venture out past those points of places that I've been to. So I definitely
Yeah.
understand that.
Sounds like you can totally relate to that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I will say airports are some of my favorite people watching places. So
That's
I do enjoy airports, and the vast majority of people that come through there.
yeah. I've seen some pretty cool airports where all of a sudden you're like, I don't remember what airport this was, but it was like a people mover and it was like going through a tunnel. They had like done like they made it in a tunnel and like the ceiling was like stars and they had all of this like outdoor nature type of noise going while you're just riding the people mover or walking on the people mover to get to the other side. And that was just like such a small like pleasant thing about
Yeah.
that airport. I mean, most airports look the same, but like I wish I remembered where it was, but it was just such a out of place thing for an airport, and yet
Right.
it brought me such joy
I
to be
love
able
that.
to kind of go through that little
Yeah.
tunnel with that scenery. It was different and it sticks in my mind. I don't remember which one it was, and yet like that's the thing out of any airport that sticks in my mind the most because it was just different and it
Yeah.
brought me joy.
Well, and in those places, I mean, sure, they can be joyful because you're going on a trip, but also, I mean, think of the stress that you see at airports.
Oh yeah.
Think of, oh shit, security is 2 hours and I have 2.5 to get to my flight. It's like it
Yep.
can be a massively stressful place. But yeah, those little things that, as simple as
Yeah.
random noises, or like, I'm trying to think of, there was one, I can't remember which airport it was either, but it was like a whole wildlife scene, and you just kind of like
Oh,
go through it, and it's like, oh wow, I'm in a whole different world. And then you get
that's
back and
awesome.
people are running and flying, and it's just going crazy. But for this like little tunnel, yeah, you're going through this whole wildlife scene, and it's just so peaceful to. And whoever made that is very smart for putting that in there to be
Uh-huh.
like, okay, let's do something very de-stressing without stressing people that they have to do it.
Yes,
It's like,
yes,
don't
agreed.
force them to have to do it, but just do it so they go through it, and maybe it will give them a little less stress of their day, or at least a moment of joy.
Yeah, I agree.
But this is a beautiful segue right into my question, and it kind of goes into your story that I've just heard a little bit of, or read a little bit of. But um, coming through what you have in your life, how did you get into doing therapy? And if you want to talk about a little, your journey in your life, and talk about how that got you to where you are doing what you do for work.
Sure. I was always the person that my friends like that people came to for like advice or like for feedback or just for like talking about their problems since I was like young. I was always that person that like friends came to and things like that. And yet I was just as fucked up as everybody else.
Yeah.
But I think, it took me a little while to figure out what I wanted to do. And I will definitely, pedal back to my own journey. But it wasn't as black and white and easy as it seems. Like
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to do something in regards to like helping. Like that's just been who I am. Again, like, realizing I can't act or sing. So then wanting to be like a veterinarian to help, but
Right.
coming to that conclusion of like that there's just, I wouldn't be able to euthanize or,
Mm-mm.
just all of the abuse. I mean, I think I would be able to euthanize if it was a matter of like what's more healthy, because I think humans should have that right when they're struggling and they're going to die. Like, why are we prolonging their
Right.
pain? But the aspect of like, I don't know if I could control myself dealing with the people who did this to the animals.
Yeah.
So I went to school. And my undergrad is in English because I thought that I would be a teacher. So to do like, there's like a fast track of getting like your teacher degree. Like you have to have your undergraduate degree. There's a fast track that if you get your undergraduate degree in like one of the main subjects of schools, so like English, math, some sort of science or history, then you only need to go an extra year for school to become a teacher, as opposed to like 2 years for a master's degree. So I did that, and then probably lasted, I want to say, like 2 to 3 days of the fast track of going to school to be a teacher, when it hit me that like I actually don't have patience for kids. So like, if I
Yeah.
don't have patience, being a teacher is probably not the best route.
Yeah. It's a little tough.
So yeah, so
That
I
takes
I
another
took a
type of person too. A beautiful type of
yeah.
person.
So I took a year off, thought about like what I wanted to do, and then realized that like I already help people in terms of like helping, like giving like feedback or mental health things and things like that. So why not get paid for it? Why not?
Yeah.
Might not be a therapist, and also like then kind of segueing back into like my own story of knowing how much therapy can help, and wanting to kind of like give back at the same time, because of the help that I had gotten. And yet, like, I'm still very much struggling at that point as well. So
Yeah.
I think like the story you're kind of referring to is, my history of having an eating disorder. I can't tell you how it developed. Like, I still to this day don't know what caused it. And I don't think there's probably one pinpoint to it. But it started when I was in seventh grade, where I just like didn't like my body, I think for me, a lot of the eating disorder was always about like control and feeling like, going into middle school was a lot different than being in elementary school and just like a lot
Yeah.
of change. And when I was in seventh grade, my parents announced that we would be moving over the summer. So I knew that that was my last year of being with the people that like the friends that I had grown up with. And that I would be needing to switch schools. So I think that like kind of had a part of it, but I had
Yeah.
pretty low self-esteem my whole life. I The kids were mean. Like I wore glasses. I was called four eyes. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
kids are mean. I was
Totally.
never really called like fat or anything, so I'm not quite sure where that came from.
Yeah.
But I was not really happy with my body. So in seventh grade, I started like just restricting some of my food. Like I definitely didn't have a full blown eating disorder at that time, but it gave me something different to kind of focus on. And then when I moved and started school in the eighth grade, it just kind of continued and got kind of worse and worse. But it was always like it wasn't constant. Like I'd have like a month where I did okay, and then like overnight completely like stop eating or really restrict myself to what kind of foods I was eating. And yet like my friends were very very aware of what I was doing,
Mm.
and at some point actually told the health teacher.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and like I got sat down at school and all of this, but nobody called my parents, and I to this day I don't understand why.
Yeah, that's
I
weird.
was Yeah, like between me and my brother, I was the good kid. Like my brother is 4 years younger than me. He was always getting in trouble. I was really good in school, did what I needed to do. So I don't think my parents were as attentive to the fact
Sure.
that I was struggling because I was the good kid.
Yeah.
So my grades were good. I had friends. I did what I needed to do. Whereas like my brother was a monster.
Yeah.
I love him, but like he was the one who would get in trouble all
Totally.
the time, talk back to teachers and things. So to this day, I wonder why nobody ever called my parents, because like it was bad enough at least at school. Like I never ate lunch at school.
Hmm.
I always ate dinner at home because I didn't yet know how to get away with not eating dinner at home, which is why I don't think it was like a full blown eating disorder yet at that point. But like why nobody called my parents, like I have no clue to this day. Like
Yeah,
why.
that's a very
Uh,
seems like a
and
very critical time to call your parents, even if it's just a
yeah,
small.
and I wonder how things would have been if like they did like let my parents know. And during the summer, like I did okay. Like I kind of left those habits behind when I wasn't in school, but then they would kick back up again. And it wasn't until I was in 10th grade um, did my parent like did they realize like something was wrong. I definitely struggled with depression. I really was pretty good at lying to my parents, wearing clothes where like perhaps they couldn't tell. And I definitely wasn't like emaciated or anything along those lines where it was so obvious.
Yeah.
But in 10th grade, it became obvious that like I definitely needed help. To which point they did put me in therapy, which I didn't love.
Sure.
Not gonna lie, didn't
Yeah.
love it as a sophomore in high
Oh,
school, and
man.
yet felt that it was something I needed to do just to shut my parents up.
Right.
But I didn't love my therapist, didn't like any of that stuff, so definitely didn't participate fully in the way that therapy is meant to be. Um, and then I think it was that year. I don't remember if it was that year or if it was 11th grade. I collapsed at school,
Oh, man.
just from like bad nutrition and everything, and was taken to the emergency room. But my weight was not low enough. It was low, but it wasn't low enough to be admitted into an inpatient eating disorder program. So, like, insurance companies really focus on weight and not about the mental and emotional distress that goes behind it. So
Wow.
usually to be admitted into a hospital for an eating disorder, like in an eating disorder like unit that just treats that, you need to be about 85% under whatever your normal weight should be for your height.
Wow.
And like they don't consider like, do you have muscle, do you have fat, how is this affecting certain things. Like insurance is very just focused on a number, which obviously doesn't help somebody.
Right.
So I kind of took that. I was They did keep me in the hospital. I need to be medically stable because I was not at all stable medically, but couldn't go to an eating disorder inpatient, like an inpatient treatment center. And I was already seeing a therapist and, doctors that were specialized in that. So like that just clicked in my head. I'm not sick enough, right? Like I don't actually have a problem. I can't go to an eating disorder unit. I'm not sick enough for that. So and I'd always kind of been in denial of having a full-blown eating disorder, which is what a lot of people are. Like, I'm fat. How could I have an eating disorder? You know, those things, even though like I wasn't fat at all. So continued with outpatient, and then my mom got diagnosed with cancer for the second time when I was in 11th grade. She told us at Christmas, and that was her second time. She had cancer when I was like 6 or 7. And basically, it was brain cancer. She got surgery, got the tumor out. The tumor grew right back. And we knew, basically she was told you're terminal.
Oh my goodness.
So that was definitely tough going into going into my senior year that way, knowing that like my mom was going to die.
Oh my God.
I also was in constant pain with my knee. Turns out that like my knee just needed like a whole bunch of work on it. Even though I wasn't an athlete, I had danced for a while, but I got pulled out of dancing. I was no longer allowed to dance due to the low weight and due to the eating disorder. So they kicked me out of dancing, but I got really, really bad my senior year, and I stopped eating I was so good at hiding food at that point, dirtying knives of like, sticking the knife in a peanut butter jar, taking 2 pieces of bread, bringing those 2 pieces of bread out to the outside garbage can and throwing them out. But there's a dirty knife, so I must have had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and 2 pieces of bread are missing. So I became a master at lying, which was definitely something that goes against my value system, and yet something that my thoughts of being sick with the eating disorder just like, had me to. And I actually stopped eating. I can't remember if it was 16 days or 18 days, like complete, like not a single morsel of food.
Oh my God.
And eventually I couldn't get out of bed. I refused to go to the hospital. And at one point, my dad just didn't have a choice. He carried me to the emergency room, and they told him to say goodbye to me. Like, I was so medically compromised that they did not think I was going to make it. So I just feel so awful for my dad, because here he has a dying daughter and a dying wife at home.
Jeez. Holy shit. Yeah.
So that was my first experience in an eating disorder unit. I was admitted to Princeton Behavioral Health or Princeton Eating Disorder Center. New Jersey only has 2 inpatients for eating disorders, which is not enough.
Right.
And I spent 6 weeks there. I actually left a month earlier than they projected. Like, I really needed to get the healthy point that they wanted to. They told my dad I would probably be there about 10 weeks. But they let me go the day after Thanksgiving so I could be with my mom and be home with her for the holidays, knowing it was going to be my last holiday, and my dad was going to pull me out AMA anyway, because like it was the last holiday I was going to have with my mom. So so that was my first experience in an eating disorder unit. And my mom did pass away on January 3rd, right after Christmas, that following year when I was a senior. And then I had my knee surgery. So I missed 106 days, I think it was, 106 days of my senior year.
Jesus.
A lot.
Yeah.
The people at school, like the higher ups, told me that they were not graduating me. I was going to have to stay back because I missed too many days, despite the fact that I was getting tutored in the hospital and being tutored at home when I had my surgery. And I was a really good student and a pretty good manipulator. So I said, okay, like, you don't have to graduate me. However, I'm not coming back. So do you want an honor student on your consciousness in your records that's a dropout? Like, an honor student as a dropout. Do you want that? And they decided they didn't. So 2 days before graduation, they said that they would graduate me. So I graduated.
Wow.
Started community college. I was not healthy enough to like do regular college, and I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do college anyway. I've never liked school. I've always been really good at school, but I never liked it.
Yeah.
So community college seemed like, the kind of the way to go.
Yeah.
I still had my eating disorder, but was able to keep myself out of like needing inpatient treatment. Like, I was still in outpatient treatment, battling depression, still struggling with the eating disorder, but not enough where I needed like a higher level of care. And then when I went to regular college 2 years later, I did the 2 years of community college and then transferred to Rutgers University. That's when it got bad again. I did 3 years so I was in the honors program at community college. What they did not tell me, and my best friend, we both were in the honors classes at community college, because we were invited and it was free tuition. What they failed to tell us was that the honors courses would not transfer to like an actual university.
Oh, God.
So we both got screwed in that regards and had to do 3 years at a regular university as opposed to like the 2 that we should have done, because like our last year at community college was pretty much a waste because we did the honors classes and we weren't told it wouldn't transfer. So I spent 3 years at Rutgers completing my undergraduate. I got it in English because I wanted to be a teacher. That was like one of the 4 things. But I really didn't have much of a college experience because I was in and out of the hospital all the time. Everybody was like, you need to concentrate on recovery, not go to school. But I knew that if I didn't go to school, I needed to have a purpose to keep fighting, to not give up with my eating disorder, to keep going and getting treatment. Because as an adult and in New Jersey, they can't force you into the hospital for addictions or an eating disorder.
Wow.
So every time I went, it was on like a voluntary basis, kind of like you need to go or, X, Y, and Z. But I knew if I didn't do school at the same time, I would have no reason to fight. Like I would have just given up and allowed it to kill me.
Sure.
And I still to this day think that was the proper decision for me to do. So I was in and out of treatment. That ended. Like I said, I started going to the course for being like the fast track for teacher before realizing that that's not what I wanted to do. And a year later, went back to school for social work to be a therapist along with one of my best friends. So my best friend Liz, I met when we were in 3rd grade. She moved in 4th grade and we had never been in school together since. Somehow we remained best friends throughout the whole entire time. Our parents really recognized just like how close and special our friendship was. So they made it possible for us to spend like long weekends together. So like if we had a Monday off of school, I would either go to her house for that weekend or she would come to mine. And we didn't go to school together again until we went to community college and then both went to Rutgers. And while we were there, we roomed together and met 2 other people who have since become our best friends as well. So there's like the 4 of us are, really, really tight since college. And then one of them went to school with me to be a social work as well. So we spent undergrad together there as well. I managed to stay out of the hospital for my eating disorder despite really struggling with it. I have some family members that are nurses that would often, not going to name names or anything along those lines, but they would sneak IVs out of the hospital in order to make sure that I was at least stable enough with my electrolytes and things.
Damn.
But I was definitely depressed. I've battled depression, my whole life. I've been suicidal. I've had a really tough time dealing with a lot of the medical issues that I have that are ironically not because of my eating disorder. So it kind of just, sometimes the medical stuff that I have seems like it's not worth it to continue living, knowing that it's chronic and not going away, and like just really hinders me to the point where sometimes I can't walk and I need a wheelchair. And so definitely battled depression, but was doing a little bit better with my eating disorder. So when I graduated undergrad, I actually was doing really bad at that time, was readmitted into the hospital for a month at that point. And then from there, went to Texas for 2 months for residential treatment, which they've always told me I've needed because I had been sick for so long, but insurance wouldn't pay for residential. So I just called pretty much every residential place that I could possibly find and see if anybody was willing to take me like on a scholarship, pro bono, not getting any money because my insurance wasn't paying for it. And I did find a place that did take me on scholarship. I stayed there for 2 months. It wasn't, they did the philosophy on the 12 steps. And I think 12 steps are wonderful, but it is not for me.
Yeah.
So I really struggled with the 12 steps. I'm not religious. I know you don't have to be religious for the 12 steps. And I think it's amazing, but it's just not for me.
Sure.
But it did keep me out of a eating disorder unit in the hospital for 4 years. I definitely still struggled through that time, but with help from family members giving me IVs. And I had a lot of medical admissions during that time because of eating disorder behaviors. But I always refused to go to an eating disorder unit, which we call an EDU, for 4 years. So I stayed out of an EDU for 4 years. Sorry, I need to take a sip of a drink.
You're all good.
throughout undergrad, but really, really struggled throughout that time. Got my first job out of graduate school and just like completely declined from there. Went back into an eating disorder unit when I got fired from that job due to, I guess, instability of mental health. I mean, I didn't weigh much at all, and I couldn't really think clearly or anything. And
Man.
being that I had, like, that was the worst it had ever been up until that point. Like, at that point, like, it had gotten worse than it had ever been before that. I got admitted to the hospital, couldn't even eat in the hospital. They kicked me out, actually.
Oh, wow.
And they kicked me out and told me I was never allowed back there, and yet still definitely needed treatment. So I found a PHP, like a partial hospitalization program. So like a program that you go to like 3 to 5 days a week for several hours a day. So it's like really intense treatment.
Okay.
So I found one that I had not been to yet, and lasted, I want to say, maybe 2 weeks there before they put me into an eating disorder unit, the one that they were attached to in Pennsylvania. And that was the first time I found myself with a feeding tube. Up until that point, I always struggled in the hospital to eat, but I was always able to at least get myself to eat within a few days of me being there. Whereas this point I couldn't. And that was my first time finding myself with a feeding tube because I just couldn't get myself to eat even in the hospital.
Wow.
Yeah, that really sucked. Not something I would recommend.
No.
But basically for just a few years, I was in and out of that hospital, the outpatient program. That hospital then eventually moved to a different hospital, more of a medical hospital. And almost every time that I was there, I was worse off than the time before. And I would say the majority of those stays, I needed to be tube fed. So
Jeez.
that was just really miserable. And then the last time that I spent in an EDU, I had a feeding tube. I couldn't walk. I was in a wheelchair. I was the worst I'd ever been. And I don't know what happened during that last inpatient stay. That point I had been battling my anorexia for 17 years at that point. I'd been labeled chronic and incurable by insurance, by doctors. Like there's a subset of people with eating disorders that never recover.
Yeah.
And it has the highest mortality rate out of any psychological disorder. And after 17 years being hospitalized, I think that was my 17th hospitalization throughout my whole entire life with treatment.
Yeah.
I was just like miserable. I never loved my eating disorder. A lot of people really attach to it and make it a part of their identity. Mm-hmm. I was not. This is actually the first time I am ever speaking about it publicly.
Which I truly appreciate.
At work finds this podcast. They're going to be finding out about my journey. I've never shared it with people. Something clicked that time. I'm not sure what it was, but being in a wheelchair, unable to walk because I was so weak, unable to feed myself, like needing around the clock feeding tubes. Like I was just so tired of it. Like it was not a life I wanted to live. Like I was chronically suicidal, believing that I couldn't recover, and just would rather have died. And yet something clicked that time. I'm not sure what it was. Like I was there for quite some time. And when I was discharged back to the PHP, for like a step down level of care. And I told myself I was just going to do it. Like I was going to give it a solid like 6 months of just eating what they told me to eat, not caring if I was miserable. It was hard, but I was like, let's at least give it like a hard try this time and see if we can actually get to it. And I got to the 6 months. I was discharged from at that point, like IOP, and gone into outpatient, which is something I hadn't been in a while. I was pretty much just bouncing between hospital and PHPs and IOPs. And I hit 6 months and I was like, wow, this has really been tough. Sure. I'm really not comfortable at a normal weight. And I really hate this, but like, let's go to 7 months. And now I've actually lost count of how long I've had of solid recovery, which I'd never been in until that point. I want to say like 8 or 9 years at this point.
Fuck yes.
I'll be hitting that mark in like at the end of December. That's where I kind of calculate that. So I'm I think I'm about to hit 9 years of recovery, and I can't even imagine that world anymore.
So
like
fucking
I can't, like it's just so far
amazing
from me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Holy shit. I remember reading it and I was like, it's one of those things, like you said, with, with your coworkers hearing it. It's something that controls your life so much, and yet sometimes people don't even know. Like with me, like I meet people now, and then I tell them about my struggle with alcoholism, and they are like, "Holy shit, what?" Wait. But then there's people that knew me during it, and they were like, "Holy shit, wait, you're sober now?" And it's such a, you do get into that identity, and then like once you push yourself away from it, like I'm a little over 2 years away from it, and I can't even.
Congratulations, Nick.
Thank you. I just can't even. It just seems like a dark dream, or a nightmare that happened, and I can't even. I have vivid memories of it, but it just seems, yeah, like a whole other lifetime.
Yeah.
Man.
And I love ice cream so much that I'm always talking about ice cream to my coworkers. Like, and I like, it's just, I cannot imagine that life again.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I love food. They see me eat, like, I'm constantly talking about like ice cream because I love ice cream. So if they happen to stumble along this podcast, which they probably will, because I've been posting, I've been sharing every time you do one. So they might, and if they do, like they do, but it's just something that I have not shared with any of my coworkers. Ever. So this is, or just, it's not something that really comes up. I'm not ashamed of it at all.
Right.
I'm actually, considering how long I battled it, I should have died. And, I almost died several times and yet am still here. So, knowing that I've had a pretty near death, a few experiences from it, it is kind of a wonder why I'm still here. And yet, like, even though I don't battle that anymore, I absolutely still battle depression from time to time. And I think I probably will my whole life. Like,
absolutely,
I think that's just something I will struggle with on and off for my whole life. And, a lot of times I really struggle because of the medical issues that I have that, it just seems like unfair. Like they're not even like residual from damaging my body so much from, poor nutrition and like low weights for so long of my life that it just sometimes like feels extremely unfair that I have these medical issues. And so, yeah, I definitely get into that why me, poor me state sometimes, but I can't do anything about it. So I kind of have to just accept it and do the best I can. But it's tiring. Like I go to the hospital twice a week for IVs, and that's just to keep me standing.
Yeah. Wow.
So, but yeah.
And that's still now 2 times a week.
Yeah. I go there twice a week. I mean, I can't even tell you how many medications I'm on, but yeah, I go there twice a week. Wow. That is something I started 2 years ago after a 3.5 week stay. I was 12 days in the hospital, 4 of them in the ICU, and then went to a inpatient rehab to gain my strength back enough to walk again. And that was the last time I was actually ever hospitalized for my medical condition. And I had never really gone more than like 4 or 5 months in like the past how many years without being hospitalized for medical reasons. So as much as I hate going to the hospital twice a year, it is obviously helping. This is the longest I've ever had in my entire life since I was a teenager of not being hospitalized.
Oh, that's amazing.
For medical reasons or for even, the eating disorder. But it's helping. It's tiring doing it.
Of course, yeah.
And I actually just finished physical therapy. I was in physical therapy for almost 2 years from that last treatment stay as well. Like it was a really bad flare. So,
oh man,
doing the best I can.
Holy shit! Wow. I mean, I know just from I've stayed in the hospital one time for 3 days with my alcohol, and it was the 3 probably scariest days of my life, and I can't even imagine being in and out of it that often, because it's just not pleasant, like I never enjoyed.
When you can't walk and like have more freaking tubes coming out and all of that stuff. Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was told as well when I went in for my liver that they didn't think I was going to make it through the night. And just getting that damning news is I mean, beyond anything that anybody wants to hear, but like I'm intrigued, like you said you did like the 12 steps, and I didn't actually do that because I didn't I knew I would struggle with the religious aspect of it,
Yes,
so I
that's exactly mine.
I steered clear of it. And I kind of had my own path with it, but what was it? I really love that you were like, there's something that clicked, and that there was a purpose that last time. And with me, I was leaving for a tour that was going to be a pretty rad tour, and I was super excited. Obviously I couldn't go on it. Had I flown to it and I was fully jaundiced, they would have looked at me and been like, what the fuck are you doing here? You're dead. You're a dead person. Like, go get help. But I was actually talking to my boss, and I just said, I need to be able to work and at least hire the locals and do the advancing for this tour, because I have to have a purpose to get out of bed every morning. I have to figure this out. Like, you know, I've just been told I don't know how long I have, and the doctors were going to check on me till I was good or I was gone, was their phrase. Because I told them just to be blunt with me. If I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
going to make it, I needed to know, because I was going to do different. I was going to go experience life. If I was dead in a week, I was not going to
Right.
just chill out in Ashland, Ohio. I was going to go see the rest of the world, or as much of it as I could before that day. Um, so working on that tour and being able to advance and just getting up and like having that purpose and like finding the joy in these little parts of life, which it reminds me of a song that I love. The lyrics are snails see the benefit, the beauty in every inch,
Hmm.
which is such a cool way to look at it, of like, when you're in that situation, which I was in, and which you've been put into a multitude of times, I just started loving every inch of life, and like finding those little beauties in life of I have to appreciate every inch, because I almost lost everything. I was almost done with life. So I started to fall in love with life again. I started truly enjoying life, which I hadn't done in a very long time. And I'm just wondering, what was yours? What did you find that motivated you, or like pushed you forward to find that love of life again, or just the purpose to live, or the reason why you wanted to stick around?
I, I had a different experience than you because I, even though I was in, recovery at that point and more so than I had ever been, like I still have always struggled with that depression. So I think having like that underlying depression even years and into my recovery of my eating disorder, sometimes the depression would just be so bad that like I didn't care if I lived or died. Like I went through the motions of life and like did what I needed to do, go to work, whatever it was. But there were so many aspects of my life that I just like didn't care if I died. So I feel like there's like that like I don't know, I really don't know what clicked in that last
Yeah.
hospitalization. um I always hated my eating disorder, which is something like a lot of people find comfort in it, and like, and I totally understand why, but I never did. Like, I always felt that it was hindering my life, like not being able to go out with friends because they were going to go out to dinner, and like I can't go out to dinner, or
Yeah.
like I was always miserable with it, which is why I think I made sure I was like still working or doing something,
Right.
during that time. Even though like it got to the point where like sometimes I just couldn't work because I was so much in and out of the hospital that didn't work. But like I always wanted to still live life. Like I never, like I hated my eating disorder. I hated that. um some people were just like, well, she's just anorexic. That's how she's always going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And, hearing from like, insurance companies like, well, she's chronic and she's incurable and she's going to be one of those 10% that dies. And I was okay with it.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to be like, I hated every moment of being in the hospital. Like, after all of those hospitalizations and all those treatments, like, you could freaking teach everything to everybody else. And yet, like, I still couldn't, like, it just was so scary. Like, the older I got, the worse it got. Like, when I was younger, in hospitals, I would maybe need like IVs and things like that. And I definitely didn't start eating the moment I went into the hospital, but I was always able to start eating within like a few days, enough to like avoid a feeding tube.
Yeah.
And as I got older, like, it just got worse with every single time. Like, and it wasn't even like I came out and had any like substantial like recovery. Like, no, it was just that I'd gotten to a high enough weight in the hospital that, like, all right, like, I didn't need to be hospitalized the second I started like restricting again. But I didn't have that experience that you had of like loving life, because I still was constantly in pain. I still like had the depression. And I've had some pretty dark days since my recovery from my eating disorder.
Yeah.
Because of the depression. The medical things that I had, and not knowing like why I had them, I finally got answers. I want to say maybe about a year ago. Was diagnosed with like a pretty rare genetic condition that is most likely, they don't have proof, but most likely the cause of like the other medical things I've had, without knowing why. Like, I've had 12 surgeries on my knee, and like I've never injured it. So like, why has my knee been so bad? Including like, I just turned 38. I had a total knee replacement, I think like 4 years ago. Like, I never ever injured it. And like, at least having answers of the diagnosis of the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome had most likely caused the POTS, the POTS is what really causes me to not be able to walk, faint a lot. I mean, I'm sure you were at some of those shows that I've passed out at.
And it was
at a lot of concerts from standing, and yet, like, and I get a lot of judgment from that. A lot of judgment from people like, if you're gonna pass out, 25% of the time, like, why do you do it? Why do you put yourself in that position of, standing all that time? And like, my answer is like, because then it's not worth living my life. Like, I'm going to risk passing out just to be at the rail, and also I'm safer at the rail. If I pass out, I'm at the rail. Someone's going to pull me out really easily. Like, it's safer for me there, but I can't live my life in like constant fear of like, well, what if I pass out, or what is this? Like, music is my coping skill. So standing in the back of the room or getting a seat, like, if there's an option to get a seat or the pit, 100% of the time I'm getting the pit, even though I know I'm more at risk than being in a seat, because that's what I love. I had a lot of judgments from people, especially some of the like very high up there Bush fans, that are like really like, I guess like Gavin, like, really does the most, like, pays attention to them the most, like, gives them a lot of attention. They've given me a lot of heat and a lot of judgmental things, a lot of just really negative, shitty things that they have said to me. And yet, like, that's why I do it, because 75% of the time I'm going to be able to make it through the whole entire concert. And I don't want to be in the back. I want to be in the front. Like, that's what I love, and that's what it gives me. And if I can't do that, then my life isn't worth living.
Well, and it wouldn't be living if you didn't give yourself those opportunities for that 75%. You would just be giving into all that shit, and it would take away a point of purpose.
It would. And so I don't know how to answer that question in black or white, because I've had really dark days since then. I haven't had like that big of like that much of a dark day in probably like 3-4 years, I want to say. But I've definitely been suicidal. Like, I will admit that, despite being a therapist, like, I've been down that dark road, and it absolutely sucks. And a lot of it's just because of like all of the things that I have to live differently than other people with the medical conditions, and like, they're not going away. Like, and on top of the things I have, I also have seizures, which are a complete different aspect. So, to know that I'm like going to live the rest of my life in chronic pain, in, fainting and needing a wheelchair sometimes, like, that's been really, really daunting for me.
Sure.
And yet I guess more so when I kind of met my husband, things kind of changed. Like I was older, like I had resigned myself to being single my whole life, but the idea of like continuing with the medical stuff has been really daunting over time. But I think the last few years, like I finally like have accepted it, like fully accepted that this is what I have to deal with. These are my challenges in life, and I either deal with them or I cry about them and be miserable.
Yeah.
So I've changed, this is my life. This is what I have. Am I going to be on the floor a lot? Sure. And like it is. Do I need to use a wheelchair to, walk long distances? I do. And like that sucks. But
right.
I kind of had to change my outlook on it. Like either say this sucks and yet live with it and accept it and make the accommodations I need to, or say this sucks and throw a temper tantrum and be miserable.
Right.
Like the end result is still the same. Medical issues aren't going away.
Right.
Like I'm always going to have them. And so I think meeting my husband had a big part to do with that. Meeting him later on in life and just like fell in love pretty fast. And like, I told him about all of my medical issues probably on our third date, which is definitely not something that is third date material, but we were both in our mid 30s and it was like neither one of us were looking for a fling. So I felt like I owed it to him to kind of be like, listen, if you want to move further in this relationship, you need to know that this is what you're going to sign up for. And if you can't sign up for this now, like I totally respect you, but I felt like he needed to know that early on instead of investing that time finding out about it later on in life, and then him being like, well, this is not something I want.
Right.
Wasting both of our times. You know what I mean? Like I felt he deserved to know.
Totally.
Being that we were looking for a relationship and not a fling at the ages that we were at. And him being like, his answer to me was, well, it's too late now. And I'm like, this is only our third date.
Like, that's beautiful. What a beautiful answer. Yeah, because I mean,
what was the other question?
No, I said that's a beautiful answer. I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, because you get a year in and then you tell them, and it's like, well, fuck, I'm out. I mean, that would be so. Oh, I can't even imagine having to spend that time of your life and then tell something super personal, and then be like, yeah, I'm out. I'm good.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, he would have found out. I would have passed out on him eventually. Right. So, like, he would have found out sooner and later. And yet, like, I just, and if he chose to say, you know what, this is not something that I want to sign up for, I would have respected him for that. Like, it's not exactly an easy thing to cope with. But I felt like he really needed to know early on to make that decision for himself before either one of us went too far and then ended up wasting time,
Totally. Yeah, it was a little different scenario, but with my partner, when I met her, she and I like just became super quick friends, and she was actually with somebody else at the time. And the first night I ever spoke to her for more than just like, hey, I'm Nick, nice to meet you, I dished all my shit. And I was like 8 months sober at that point, and like told everything. And so I was like, well, that's me, it just was like, blah, it just came out. And so I was like, well, at least and then when we started working towards being together, it was like we had extensive conversations about what I had dealt with and everything. So it made it like nothing to be hidden, because I was like, it's gonna come out. Like I can't help but talk about it because it was such a controlling part of my life for so long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
So in all your travels, what was your favorite travel memory? And I'm sure you have a ton, and I mean, tell me as many as you want.
So let me ask clarifying, is this traveling just to travel or traveling to see concerts?
Any that you, I mean, any and all. Open to your answer.
I think one that like significantly stands out was when I was 18, like after graduating high school, my best friend and I got it into our heads of like, hey, let's go travel to Europe. And we had literally just gotten out of high school, fresh off 18 years old adult, but like not really an adult at 18. And this was just when the internet was starting to come up, like being able to find info. And we decided ultimately that we wanted to go to Greece. And my dad has a timeshare that he gets like a week, and it's in Florida, but he can like move it around.
Sure.
And at that time, my best friend was raised by her father. My mom had just passed, so it was just both of us, like with our dads. And I remember them getting on the phone with each other and being like, "Hey, should we let the girls do this legally?" Like, I mean, we're 18, and yet, like, I remember them just kind of going, like, "Yeah, screw it. Like, if they can afford this right now, like, they're only going to be young once." And my dad gave us his timeshare for that week, which was really awesome because even though we were stuck in one space and couldn't necessarily like travel, it was like our first big vacation. It was our first like big thing on our own. And we chose to go to Greece. And because my dad like gave us that, we had a lot more money in our pockets
Yeah.
to then go to another island when we were done with the timeshare that my dad gave us. So we were able to see another island as well, and actually like really enjoy the vacation and not have to worry about money because
Right.
we stayed in a timeshare that my dad gifted us for a week. And just like that first big vacation outside of like things that I'd done in the United States, and being alone with like no other adults, just her and I. And it was my first time scuba diving ever. And it was
Wow.
just like, it was just amazing. Like seeing the different culture in Greece, like we did a lot of exploring. And while we were on one island for a week, and there's like tons of islands, even that we still got to explore a lot of that island. And then because we had that timeshare, we had money left over to then be able to spend a few days on a different island and pay for a hotel there. And it's the scuba diving in both different places was so vastly different, like the things that we saw and the way the
Oh,
water
wow.
was,
Yeah.
even though it was all grease. So that was really cool because it was just
Yeah. I'd say
my
that's,
first time biggest traveling. And
yeah,
they didn't have great cameras at the time, so we still don't really have great pictures of it.
of
And yet,
course.
like,
Yeah.
I'll always remember that as my first big vacation without parents or adults or like
Right.
things in that long, and having the financial freedom to literally do whatever we wanted. So that was really cool.
Oh, man. And what a cool place. Was that the first time you'd ever scuba dived
It
or
was.
scuba
That was my
dove?
first time I've ever scuba dived. I fell in love with it. I really enjoy scuba diving. I haven't done it many times because I'm not certified.
Sure.
So basically just do it when I go to some place that offers like, the hour-long swimming pool instructions on how to do it. And, only going 40 feet. You can't go
Yeah.
more than 40 feet without an actual diving license. And yet 40 feet is plenty
Sure.
for
Oh, my
me. I don't
God.
need to go further.
Yeah.
And it's just one of the most freeing experiences just to be down there in the water, like completely vulnerable and surrounded by whatever's in that particular world. And
Yeah.
yet so peaceful.
Oh,
I love
man.
it.
I, okay. One of my biggest fears is being stuck in the middle of the ocean in the middle of the night with not on like a on a boat, not on a boat, just being somehow stranded there. Because like even if you're a really good swimmer, it doesn't matter. You're not supposed to be there. And the vast
Right.
darkness and the blackness of night and the ocean, like it's a horrifying thought. And then I absolutely love swimming. I've loved swimming and I love being underwater. I even weirdly in the shower I'll just sit there and let the water run over my head cuz it makes me feel like I'm underwater. But I am slightly terrified to scuba dive because of my fear of the open ocean.
I think that makes sense. I mean, you're right. While you're not venturing too far from the boat without, the certification, you're also not alone. You're with a guide. And yet, like, you're far enough away from the boat that if something happens, like, it's going to happen. And then you have to get yourself to the boat. Like, it's not going
Right.
to happen. You're not going to have enough warning. So that's valid. And yet, I love it. It's so very peaceful. And, I'm aware of the risk. There's always a
Yeah.
risk going into another world like that. But yeah, it's just, I mean, your fear is absolutely valid. And yet maybe one day you can snorkel, kind of get to that. My husband can't scuba dive either. He panics and can't get the breathing right.
Yeah.
But he,
When you went in Greece, what kind of did you see any sea life?
We saw a lot of fish. We were told that we might see sharks, but very they said like maybe once a year that happens, but I guess they have to tell us. We saw a lot of fish, a lot of coral. We went twice on the island that we stayed at for a week, and then we went once at Mykonos, which is the island we went to after the first island, and vastly different type of fish that were there. We also went through a cave at some point, which was just awesome. Apparently, there was an octopus that I missed. My best friend saw it. I missed the octopus, so that was a little disappointing. But Greece was more just like fish and just a lot of like coral and like all of that stuff on the bottom. So not nearly as much sea life as I've seen in like other places. Yeah. So when we went to the Bahamas and Atlantis, I guess it was 2 years ago, maybe 3, I don't know. I went scuba diving there. Like we went off of the resort and like took a boat and like did it independently of the resort. And I have never seen more wildlife. Like it was, you couldn't look anywhere without seeing fish, and it was like all different colors. There was coral there as well. We were warned that sharks tend to frequent that area, but no sharks came at that point. Yeah. And it was just, that was probably one of the better experiences just because of all the wildlife. And it was just fish. Like there was nothing else that I saw, but so many different species of fish that were so vastly different and vibrant in their colors that it was just like, I like, it's really even hard for me to put a word on how colorful and just gorgeous everything was down there. And like the clearness of it. Like I live in New Jersey, so like I grew up at the beach. It takes me 20 minutes to get to the beach. And my grandparents had a house on the beach. So like I've spent my life growing up on the beach, and like the water in New Jersey, sometimes it's clear enough to see the fish like going around you, but like we don't have tropical fish or anything like that. And we know there's sharks out there. We've been getting more and more great whites throughout the past few years, and yet like you don't see any of that really in New Jersey because the water's not that clear.
All right, that leads me to my next question. If we were not in pandemic situation and we didn't have restrictions, which we do now, and I came up to you and I said, here's a plane ticket to anywhere in the world, where would you be going?
This has always been a hard question for me because I vacillate between two places. All right. I vacillate between Africa and Australia.
Ooh, yeah.
Like I love animals. I'm an animal lover. I'm a vegetarian strictly for, the animals, like not health reasons or any other stuff. And elephants are my favorite animal of all time. I am so mesmerized by them. Yeah. I'm so like such a big creature is so complex like humans. Like they mourn their dead. No other animal outside of human beings mourn their dead, and like they know if they come across bones and like the bones have been dead, laying there for a while, like an elephant knows if that was their family member or not just by like using their trunks and putting it on like the bones. Like humans can't do that. If I see just bones, like I have no idea who that is, whereas like they do. So they just fascinate me, and that would be my reason for wanting to go to Africa. Is to see elephants, volunteer on there's like a lot of places that help raise babies, like orphaned babies, because they need their moms for like years. I don't think they wean until like after 2 years. But the poaching is so bad that so many babies lose their moms. So I really would love to volunteer on like a sanctuary for elephants. So that's my reason for Africa. Plus, I think I would love to just be immersed in the culture there and really like learn different things there. Yeah. And then Australia, because I really love animals, and there's so many different types of animals, and like I like reptiles, and there's a lot of reptiles in Australia that you cannot see anywhere else. Like you will not see them in a zoo in the United States. Like you cannot see them because Australia is very, very strict on what animals they will allow to be exported. So just going there and seeing animals I would never have the ability to see, and I would absolutely go to the Seaburn Zoo. Like I think that would be just an awesome experience to go there.
Oh, man, yeah.
So I don't have a definite answer for you. I vacillate between those two, and they're pretty equal. I think if I got asked, I'd probably have to just flip a coin.
Well, I mean, in my beautiful scenario, you could say the plane ticket starts by taking halfway to Africa and spending time there, and then it continues on to Australia. So I'll
Sounds
say
amazing.
you get both with my scenario.
Yeah,
And I wish I could
that'd
truly
be
give you that scenario.
that
I wish that
would be
was
great.
my I wish I could just be in this like in this podcast be like, "Where do you want to go?" And then be like, "Cool, I just booked you a flight." And there you go. And I mean, how rad would that be?
Yeah. So you want to be Oprah Winfrey?
I mean, in a sense. I mean, that would be incredible. I've always said if I won the lottery, I would literally just call up my friends and say, "Hey, where do you want to go?" It's kind of why I do this question because there's so many answers and every answer is right. You know, like,
Yeah.
and I wish I could just call people up and say, "Hey, what's top of your list? Where do you want to go?" And then say, "Rad, all right, I'll meet you there. Bring a couple friends. Let's go."
That'd be so cool.
And just see the world that way. You know, like I've done that with friends of like, hey, where do you want to meet? And then I've met them places that I wouldn't necessarily want to go by myself. Well, not that I wouldn't want to go, that I wouldn't have chosen. So I've been to places that way. And it would just be so neat to be like, this has been your life dream. Let's do it and see what you want to see and, you know, see those
Absolutely.
reactions. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that would be cool. Yeah, I would like to be Oprah. Yeah, that'd be pretty neat. And I like that I, I I have a struggle with zoos in general. I think they're really neat, and I know they do some conservation and help the animals. But I also get really sad. Like we were in Boise for a month this summer with car troubles or van troubles, and we got to go to the zoo because a friend of Lindsay's here. Her sister worked at the zoo there, so she kind of took us around, and I was just so sad. Like we saw African wild dogs, and I'd never seen them before, and they were so cool looking. I mean, they looked like dogs from here, but you know they're just gnarly as shit, and you
Mm-hmm.
you know you wouldn't mess with them. And I was just thinking, I would so much rather see them running around free in Africa and you know, in their own habitat. And I love that Australia protects their animals that way because I know friends of mine, one of my good friends, she, before all this, like one of her last trips, she went to Australia for a couple weeks with a tour and they went to some island. I can't remember what it was. And this species that she got to see was literally only on this island, and so
Mm-hmm.
she's seen this species that if you make you can only see at that island. And I think that's so amazing that they conserve their animals that way.
Yeah, I'm really also very picky and very like I vacillate between the zoo thing as well. And so like if I'm gonna go to a zoo, I do a hell of a lot of research on it beforehand to see like, okay, what are their beliefs? What do they go by? Are they helping conserve? Because I think sometimes like there really is no other way to save a species than to take it out of its environment,
Yeah.
breed it, and then learn how to put it back into its natural environment. And yes, I would love to say like natural selection and that like all animals die out eventually. So part of me is like, okay, let them die out. And yet the other half is like, well, they're actually not supposed to die out. It's because we as humans are forcing
Mm-hmm.
them to die out. And it's if it wasn't us, they would still be going outside of like the dinosaurs. Like they went
Right.
when they went. So I do a lot of research. Like I don't go to circuses or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a zoo pretty close to us, like 20 minutes away. And it's called the Popcorn Park Zoo Sanctuary. So it's a zoo, but it's not really a zoo. It's a sanctuary, and almost all of the animals that they have there have come from someplace else, and are gonna live there the rest of their life. They call it like their retirement home, and a
Yeah.
lot of them are injured, blind, came from like maybe homes of people who thought it was a great idea to have a baboon
Oh
as a
God.
pet,
Yeah.
and turned out they can't take care of a bamboo.
Hmm.
So we go there because like without that particular zoo, these animals would have been euthanized or continuing to be abused in whatever environment they were in before.
Yeah.
So I'd rather them spend the rest of their lives out in a cage per se there than continue on their lives being worked to death, abused,
Right.
whatever it is that they came from. So I really actually really respect that particular sanctuary. And they basically say this is the home that animals come to die at. And I know that sounds extremely depressing. And yet like it means that they don't leave there. They're going to die there. But that's because they were in such horrible situations before they came there. So at least when they get old and they do die, they're going to know what love is. They're going to know what, peace is, even if it's not their natural environment. It's the best case scenario for them with what they were previously in beforehand.
Yeah. I like that. I think that's beautiful. I love that people have the heart for that. And I've definitely thought about doing something, like sanctuaries and stuff like that. I wanted to volunteer here, but I got really sad thinking I'd have to see the shit that I didn't want to see of animals, coming in so mistreated, and I think I'd get really sad.
Yeah.
But
me too.
Oh man. Yeah, and it takes such a beautiful person to go over and above and be able to take care of that of animals in that way.
Yeah, it is. I would love to do it as well, but I don't. I'm kind of like you. Like when I was younger, I really wanted to be like either an actor or an actress or a singer. Before you're too old to realize you don't have talent for that, like when you're a little kid,
yeah.
Or a veterinarian. And one reason I'm not a veterinarian is I suck at science, so like
Sure.
I really have a hard time with that. And the other one is I don't know how much I could handle the same things that you said, the abuse coming in, having to euthanize an animal,
oh god,
keeping my own emotions in check and not wanting to like beat the crap out of people that abuse their own animals that now I have to save. So that's another reason why I'm not a veterinarian.
Yeah, I think I would I think I would lose it on a lot of people, and my heart would break every day, and I don't think I could handle it. I think I'd last maybe a week, maybe I don't even know. It'd probably be less than that because I would just get so sad. I wouldn't be able to separate. It's it's like and I mean, thank goodness we have people like this in the world, but friends of mine that are nurses, and I hear the gnarly shit they've seen, and they're like, well, you just get used to it. And I'm like, I don't need to get used to that in my life. I can't get used to.
I think you can if you learn to compartmentalize.
Yeah,
like
true.
I think, because I do it, with my clients and what I do for a living. And yet, like, anybody who says it doesn't affect you is lying. Like, am I able to separate my life from my clients' lives? Absolutely. And yet, like, it does still affect you hearing what you hear. And there are some cases that, like, I can't turn off. The majority of them I can over I've learned to compartmentalize, and for the majority, I'm pretty good at it. But there are just some cases that I just can't. And I do the best I can, but I think that's just part of being a human being. And and back to like the animals, I think I can do it with humans, with all of the abuse I hear and the struggles that people go through.
Yeah.
But I don't think I could do it with animals, which is ironic.
Right. Yeah. All right. So it leads me to my last two questions, which I love asking everybody, but especially right off of your just unbelievable story is, what would you want the world to know about you?
To know about me?
Yeah.
I think like a lot of people think that I'm pretty strong and I'm a fighter, and like I am. Definitely I'm strong, definitely a fighter. And yet there have been times where I've just wanted to give up. And I think some people like you're strong, you can do this. And sometimes that I know that they're doing that to help and things like that. And yet like I'm not strong 100% of the time. There are definitely times where I want to give up and be like, I don't want to live like this, or I hope I go to sleep tonight, and I don't care if I die tonight. Not that like we call that like passively suicidal, I guess. Not that I'm actually wishing to die, like I don't want to die. And yet there's been points in my life, not now and not for a while, but there's been points in my life where I'm like, all right, like if I die tomorrow, like I'm okay with that. I'm not going to actively end my life. And yet, like if I get hit by a truck and I die, I'm okay with that too. So just, I think, letting people know that, I've dealt with a lot in my life and I will continue to deal with a lot in my life. And that doesn't mean that I'm strong 100% of the time. And I don't feel like anybody needs to be strong 100% of the time. And that is okay to be weak at times. It is okay to be vulnerable at times. So I think letting people know that who may see only like kind of one side of me, that like there's a vulnerable side and there's a side that struggles sometimes, and that is okay. I think like that's okay.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Because I mean, yeah, there's times when I was fine with if I died, like, and it is when you put out one part of your life where you're like, I'm this strong person, and then you see that vulnerable side. It is beautiful to be able to be that vulnerable and let people see that.
Yeah, it is, and it's not easy.
No, definitely not. So I really truly appreciate you speaking about this, because I know so many people have struggles with this, and um, I think there's so much power in your story to that you've gotten to the place that you have, and that it's ongoing. And like you said, like, yes, I am a fighter, which if anyone listens to this and doubted that, then they're just fucking foolish. um, but it's a true testament of just like how much beauty you can put out in the world, while having all this darkness that has happened. And like your mom, and all these stories, it's so powerful to see what you do, and that you're still, through all this, you picked a field where you help people, which I think is so fucking admirable, that you put yourself into that situation all the time to help people.
Thanks, Nick.
I
And
think
I
it's
and I think
truly
in certain
remarkable.
ways that like because of the journey that I've been through, I feel like that makes me a better therapist to be
Sure.
like non-judgmental. And I don't share my stories with my clients. That's so unethical. Like,
Yeah.
that's so unethical. And yet, like, I think that having the experiences that I've had and going through the things that I have had, I think in certain ways it makes me a better therapist because
Yeah.
I can be like non-judgmental and be there for my clients the best way that I can. And I work in a PHP and an IOP program, so my clients are not
Beautiful.
with me long term. They're with me for like 8 weeks, several days a week, things like that. Although many of people come back, and so
Sure.
then I'm their therapist again. And yet, like, I feel like as much as I don't like that I've gone through the things that I've gone through, and they still, will always be there, they also have shaped me into being the person I am, into being the therapist that I am, into being, willing to continue working on myself and knowing that's something that I think all humans can do throughout their life. Like, I don't think there's ever a point in time where we're like, all right, cool, I've done everything I need to do to better myself or to, change things or be more open. I'm good. Like, I think
I'm
that we
good.
can
Yeah.
completely, constantly, work on ourselves. And I also learn things from my clients. Like,
Yeah.
I work with an extremely tough population, and some of the women I work with some of their diagnoses, like other therapists outpatient will not take clients on with borderline personality disorder because
Ooh,
that
yeah.
is a very difficult population to work with. So like I work with all women, and we specialize in like DBT type of treatment and trauma. So most of our women, not all, but most of our women have some sort of trauma, have had in their lives, or have borderline personality disorder, which is definitely difficult to treat. And yet, like, I think because of the things that I've gone through, like, it's a challenge sometimes to work with these clients. And yet I absolutely love doing what I do, and I like really watching their journey. Like, we're intense treatment, get them out of crisis mode, and then they can go back into outpatient therapy and do the work that really needs to be done. We teach them the coping skills, provide them the education on trauma and things like that to help get them out of crisis mode. But then the real work happens after they leave us. But to just be a part of their journey while they are with us, and I get so many times of like, wow, you've helped me so much. Thank you. And I usually tell the clients, like, yeah, I've given you the tools and I've given you the knowledge, and I've been here by your side for, these 8 to 10 weeks, but like, it's them who does the work.
Right.
I can give them all of the information, teach them all of the coping skills that I have. And they have to choose what to do with it. And
Right.
so it's rewarding, though, to really see like when some of them do really, some of them don't do so well, and
Sure.
that's okay. And others like make pretty big, drastic changes. And it's really rewarding for me to like see the change in them. And I love doing what I do, even
Yeah.
if it can be difficult, even though I'm highly burnt out at times.
Oh God.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful form of empowerment that, or not even a form, it's beautiful empowerment that you give people, which I think is incredible.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So the last one, if you had the ear of everybody in the world, what would you say to them?
Say that again. What was the question?
If you had the ear of everybody in the world, what would you say to them?
If I had the ear, gosh, for everybody in the world, I would say check yourselves. Like, really check yourselves and really be open to, like, are you the problem in your problems, or is there other things that you can fix? I think that we live in such a judgmental world, no matter where we are. That it really hinders a lot of progress as like a community, as a person, as a country, as a world. Because I think that humans are so quick to judge. And some of that is biology. We are naturally born to think of the negative over the positive. That's a survival mechanism from when we were cavemen. Like, that's a fact that we are wired to think of that. And it doesn't mean that we need to stay that way. So I think if I had the ear of everyone, I would really kind of say, like, check yourself, take a big hard look at yourself. Where are your judgments? Where are your beliefs? Where can you work on changing that? Because I think that if we were more judgment, like less judgmental as like a society, that things would be so different.
Right.
And you know, and really think about, like, do you really know the story of this other person you're judging? Because you don't.
No.
Like, and even if you know this person really, really well and they've shared their story with you, you still haven't walked in their shoes, even if you know the majority of it, like, and are pretty confident that you're 99.9% sure you totally understand this person and can empathize. And while that may be true, you still have not lived in their shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's I think that you nailed it on the head with that. We're missing so much of that in life, and I think you put it quite beautifully.
Thanks. Yeah. We miss compassion a lot, I think.
Yes. Well, Danielle, I so appreciate your time and hanging out and chatting with me.
I really appreciate that I feel really honored to be somebody who you asked to be on your Beautifully Human podcast. And this was definitely my first time, telling that story. So I was a little nervous about it. And yet you made it really easy. And
beautiful.
I feel good that I'm able to kind of share that. But really, really feel honored that you asked me to be a part of this. So thank you very much for that, Nick.
You are so welcome. I'm completely honored that you would open up and tell your story. And, I think it's so empowering and such a, it's just incredible to see the person you are with, what you've been through. And it just lends itself perfectly to what you said, is like, even if you know somebody well, or you kind of know them, like, you don't truly know their story and you've never lived in their shoes. So, that's what I'm trying to do with this, is just shed a light on a lot of human issues. And we all have them, we all are dealing with them, and we deal with them in the way that we can. And the more that we see people being vulnerable, I feel like it can change people, of like, oh shit, okay, I had that struggle too, or I know somebody with that, and then now I kind of am better equipped to know how to help somebody, any of those things. I just want to spread a little ripple to the world of love and kindness and beauty, and you definitely helped with that today. So I thank you so much.
Thanks, Nick.
All right. Well, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.
You too, and I really appreciate this again. Excited to kind of hear it and see what I sound like.
Yeah.
Have a good rest of your day as well, and thanks again.
Of course. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye. All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Beautifully Human podcast. To hear more beautiful stories from beautiful humans, follow us on Spotify and rate and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Wanderlust Moon Duo. Peace signs up.